Christen for the Valley Historical Preservation Project. The interviewer is myself, Margaret Foxwell, assisted by my husband, Thomas. And we are in the Christian home. We want to thank you, Louis and Cheryl, for granting us this interview. The material will be used to further interpret the heritage of the region. It will primarily be used for educational purposes, but may also be used in promoting economic development and tourism. Louis, would you give us your full name?
Louis Allen Christen.
You were born when and where?
December 13th, 1946, near St. Olaf, about a mile west of the Norway Church.
And who are your parents?
Will and Ines.
And where were they born?
Mother was born near Randalia, in 1906, and Dad was born southeast of Elgin about in 1912.
Your mother's maiden name was what?
Chase.
Chase. Did any of your direct Christian family members, or your mother's either, immigrate to the U.S.?
Both of Dad's parents came from Switzerland, and and Mom's mother came across, and Chase's, I guess, supposedly, we'll go back far enough, one of those was a Hessian soldier in the Revolutionary War, so that would have been some German ancestry there, and there's a little bit of, I don't know, Scotch or something in there too, I guess. Christens came in 1889, and I believe the Myers, my mother's grandparents, came in 1880.
A lot of immigration heritage in almost everyone's family. Cheryl, what is your full name, maiden name?
Cheryl Lynn Shipton Christen.
You were born.
September 5th, 1947 in the old Postville Hospital.
And where were you living then?
I'm from Claremont. My family lived there.
Did you have any, well, tell us your parents' names then.
My mother's name is Vina. She prefers to go by Jackie, and she was born on a homesteaded farm that her family immigrated to, I think, in the late 1850s. But it was my great-grandparents that immigrated. I have to go back that far on both sides of the family.
Where from?
My mother's a full-blooded Norwegian. They came from Norway. And my dad is half German and half English, and he was born in Claremont. And his grandparents were the ones that immigrated. And I really don't know when.
Have you ever thought, like I have many times, why didn't I listen to Grandpa?
Oh, yes. And of course, my dad isn't living now, and I wish I'd have listened to him even. But it was interesting. My dad was not a real big historian, but my great-grandparents on his side of the family are buried in the little cemetery between Claremont and West Union by the West Union Airport. And us kids were riding in a gravel truck with him one day, and he just all of a sudden stopped at that cemetery to make sure we knew where the gravestones were, which was a little unusual, but he did take the time.
Have you been there since?
No.
No? I was wondering if they're kept up.
Oh, yes, it's mowed. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we all wish we'd ask more questions. How about you, Louis? What do you wish you knew that you never asked?
Of course, on the Christian side, my grandfather died when I was, I don't know, 8 or 10 or something like that, and so I don't remember that much about him. Of course, he understood English much better than he spoke it. He could speak English, but he didn't like to speak it. And basically the same way as on my mother's side, they were not real close. We didn't see them real often, not that they were that far away, but so I really was never and my grandfather Chase died when I was, I don't know, 10 or 12 too, so, but I guess I never really ever heard many stories from either one of those personally.
But you probably wish you knew.
Oh yeah, there's a number of things that,
Well, we never could find it all out. Where did you go to school, Lois?
well, I was in the last kindergarten class in country school, just, well, it'd be a half mile south of 56 on the Wadena Road.
Elyria what? Two?
They say, the Foxville say it's Elyria number 2 school, and we, like I say, we were the last class, or we were the last, I went there the last year that it was open, and then it was later, after they consolidated, then it was moved into town and used for a home. And
Do you know whose home it is?
it was Lester Gearing's, and is the family still there? Is she still there?
No,
Or do
that's
they own?
Larry Armstrong.
Oh, okay,
That's-
okay. And I'd have to stop and count how many were in school, but I know that there wasn't anybody in second grade until Roy and Wilma Roethlisberger moved in on the 1st of March, and then Janet was in second grade. Otherwise, there wasn't anybody in second grade that year.
Can you name some of the kids that were there?
Well, the oldest would have been Lyle and Lyle Medbury and Dave Frieden. I guess my brother David would have been the next age. He'd have been, I think, the only one in his class. There'd have been a couple the next year down. I guess no. There were 3 of us, I guess, in kindergarten.
Yes, you and Alan and Anita.
Right. There were a couple in, Brother Glenn and Dave Thompsonville and Bob Roethlisberger were in first grade at that time. And I don't know if there would have been anybody like in third
Was
or fourth.
Sanders there then?
Well, they'd have been our age. No,
That's
no,
right.
they
weren't
weren't.
there.
No, they
Sanders
weren't.
were there. Mm.
Yeah. And,
It's interesting that you and Alan and Anita all graduated from Valley then too.
yeah.
Then, where did you go then? Where was you? Did you go to a country school room in town?
We had some grade schools, or some of the early grades were in the brick schoolhouse, and then we had 2 or 3 grades out in the country schools that had been moved in. And then in junior high, we went to Claremont.
In what building? The junior-
What is it,
It would have been the former high school.
the old high school?
Claremont High School.
Yeah,
Then to Valley.
right. We graduated in '65.
Remember how many were in the class?
59, I believe.
Big class.
We were a little smaller. The year before us had several more kids in it, but that was the first of the post-war baby boomers, and we were the next year, so we weren't quite as big.
What you're saying is that you and Lois were in the same class?
Yes.
Where did you go to elementary school, Cheryl?
I went to the Larrabee Building in Claremont, and there again, I never appreciated that building. I just took it for granted. Didn't want to go to school when I was in kindergarten. I guess my dad had to just take me over and tell the teacher, you keep her here or you spank her. And it wasn't until after I was out of school many, many years and went back into that building that I appreciated the building we did have for a schoolhouse. But I went to school for 6 years there, and then when we went to junior high is when Lewis and I first were together as a class. The elementaries were in their separate towns, and then junior high then combined.
Lois, did you go to Ellen Flanagan one year?
We had her,
First or second?
yeah, first or second grade in Elgin. That was my only class with her.
I always thought that was interesting because you and Alan went to her and she had taught so many of the parents over here in the same country school that you went to. Great teacher. I haven't asked you folks when you were married.
September 26th, 1987.
Right?
Right. He can remember that better than I can.
Where were you married?
Elyria Church.
Elyria Church. And then what did you do? After you were married, where'd you live?
Well, I guess I've lived here since I was about 15 months old.
We came home from our wedding and he went to the barn to milk his cows.
You folks had moved to town by then, hadn't you?
Right.
And did you help milk that night?
Oh, I probably was in the barn, but Louis wants to milk his own cows.
Wouldn't want his bride doing it. And where was your church? before
I
you were
was
married?
a former member of the West Claremont Lutheran Church
Claremont.
in Claremont, right.
And Louis,
I've always went to Elyria.
and now you both go to an area. You've always lived here as a couple then?
Yes.
How about professions? Had you ever done anything but farm, Louis?
No, that's all I've ever done.
Why don't you tell us about your brothers? I always thought that was interesting that they all had different interests.
Well, I'm the youngest of 4 brothers. David, the oldest, was a gun repair man for 10 years or so now. And I just can't say for how long it's been now. He's had a welding shop in Wadena. Brother Paul, the next one, has always been interested in airplanes. After the Air Force, he went to Tulsa, Oklahoma to aircraft mechanic school and worked at the Cedar Rapids Airport on mechanic work for a number of years. And the last, I don't know, 15 or 20, I suppose at least 15 years, he's worked for Rockwell or Collins at the Cedar Rapids Airport, and he's doing FAA work for him now. Brother Glenn has always been interested in radios or electronics, and after the Air Force, he has been with radios, business band radios or whatever, the last number of years, 20 years or so. He's been in Marshalltown.
I always thought it was interesting that you boys all had different interests and your parents encouraged each one of you in the things you wanted to do. I know the house was filled with books. There was a welder out here in an early day, and Paul had his pilot's license when?
Oh, what, when he was 16 or something like that?
Oh, he was.
And he built model airplanes. But no, we all had separate interests, and I don't know if we were encouraged particularly to do it with any of them, but we weren't discouraged on any of our interests.
Well, you didn't have a little black box in the house to sit and watch.
No. No.
It made a big difference.
No.
I had another question, but I don't know what it was. Were the boys in service, any of you?
The 3 older brothers were 2 in the Air Force, and Dave was in the Army.
Cheryl, what were you doing after you finished school?
I stayed around home the summer I graduated from high school because I was one of the younger ones to graduate, and I really wanted just to work for a while. get a job, kind of find out what I wanted to do, and that the following August after graduation, the bank in Elgin called, and one of their gals was quitting and wondered if I'd be interested in coming down for an interview. They had talked to the school, and Mr. Zurbriggen, who was the principal at that time, had told them that I, at that time, did not have plans on going on to college yet. And so he said, you know, she might be interested in working for you, and that was 33 years ago.
One of those jobs you had to learn by working there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to your childhood. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have one older brother. He's 16 months older than I am, and John, and he lives in Claremont yet with his wife.
What can you tell us what you do for your, any special childhood memories?
Well, I was always sick. When I was 5 years old, I got rheumatic fever that left the heart valve damaged, and so I was kind of held back and protected. I took a lot of my kindergarten and some of my first grade year at home. I took all my sixth grade year at home because I was had a relapse when I was in sixth grade, and so I guess probably that stands out as my biggest memory. I was a little high-strung and always wanted to do something I wasn't supposed to. But my dad was self-employed, and consequently we didn't have weekends free at that time, but we did go camping. We had a tent, and we used to think that was really great.
People didn't go too far probably then.
No.
Well, tell them about your first surgery.
Well, I had my first open heart surgery in 1959, and they did it at University Hospitals in Iowa City. And at that time, it wasn't University of Iowa, it was the State University of Iowa. And they had been doing heart surgeries for about 8 years, so it was not a real pioneer experience, but it was a little unusual. And they just went in and repaired it, and it was, I guess, my own little miracle. My lips were no longer blue, my fingernails were no longer clubbed, and I could do more things after that.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
You look good now. Lois, what did you do when you were growing up? Now, some of the fun things.
Of course,
Must have been a lot of exciting things for three brothers.
I guess out of the four, I'm probably the one that's been most interested in outdoors. Of course, we did some hunting, and one summer, I guess it was, I think we were out of school. Yeah, we were out of school by that time. We explored a few caves, or actually they're coon dens, but that's one of the things we did. And I can remember we did go to three air shows. Of course, a couple of the other brothers were quite interested in that, and I suppose I tagged along for a little interest. I guess we didn't get very far away from home.
You always had fun. Alan was always part of them. I remember one summer you gathered up apples from all over the country, and your mother and I had everything we could find filled with canned apple juice that we sealed the jars with paraffin.
Oh, really?
Because they had, what was that? Where'd you have that apple press?
Well, that was originally came from Dad's uncles, the Christen brothers, and they weren't using it anymore, so I asked if I could have it, and they gave it to me, and so and we still have it. Dad had rebuilt it here a few years ago. We haven't used it quite a few years, but it's still serviceable. And there's some other people that have used it since we have, but I guess we probably collected quite a few apples around the country that year and made apple juice, apple cider.
It was good. What was I going to say? Got away from me. Oh, how about butchering?
Well, I guess we were probably the last ones in the neighborhood to do that, and I suppose that's been maybe up to 70 or something like that we would butcher. And
Butchered what?
hog and beef.
At the same time?
Right. And then we'd grind about 2 parts of beef and 1 of pork and make bologna. Dad's uncle would smoke it, and then later I would do it.
It was in casings.
Right. But we haven't even done that for a number of years, because the last few times it hasn't turned out. I don't know what I was doing wrong, but it didn't turn out, so we've kind of lost interest in that. So maybe we'll try it again someday.
What were the casings?
They're hog casings. That's hog intestines
That's what they still use?
that have been cleaned. Yes, a natural casing.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know what they used if they did now.
Yeah.
You know what I used to play with? My dad would take the hog's bladder and blow it up, and that was the most lasting balloon us kids could ever have. We play football, we play everything with that.
I've heard of that, but I guess we never did that.
Kind of gross when you think about it, but it worked. Did you, how did you get to high school? Bus?
Yeah, we always had the bus, and I guess there were several different routes that we had. We had Tommy Ogle and Les Kleppy, and let's see. I think those were probably. I guess right now that's the only ones that I can remember picking this up at home. We would. Different years we would transfer in the middle of the route, but I guess those are 2 main drivers that I remember.
I think later you had to transfer down to Jake Snyder's, didn't they?
At one time we transferred there, and then at one time up here at the end of the Ridge Road we'd switch there.
At least they did down there when Susan was in school, because I tried to head her off one night. She was going home with Kathy Beatercofer, and you know where they lived. She was snowed in there for several days. we missed her at the corner. She went. Cheryl, did you live on the farm?
No, I was born and raised in town.
And then at school you walked?
Yes, and that was one of the selling points of my folks buying the house that they did. It was right across the street from the school, and then I didn't have to walk very far with the heart condition. And my dad laughed when the consolidation with Elgin came and the new school was built in the country. He said, I bought a house across the street from the school, and now they walk across and get on a school bus. But that's the only school bus I ever rode, was from Claremont to the high school.
When you were going to the Levy School, did they still have that one choice room reserved for the museum?
Yes, and it was on the upper floor, and that was always what the 5th grade got to do as a field trip, was walk across the hall and tour the museum. No other grades went into that room. Of course, it was always locked, but the 5th grade always got to tour the museum.
It was a nice building, nice room.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What was the upstairs? They had a stage.
Yes, that
A
was,
curtain on it.
that was the auditorium, and that was also the sixth grade room. And I know they had portable blackboards that they would put up, and that was kind of the dividing area between what was classroom and what was auditorium. That was the year I missed school, so I did not get to go to class. My sixth grade teacher would have been Ann Dean Vasby, who also would have taught my father in school. My mother went to country school, so she didn't have her, but sort of an Ellen Flanagan type individual. She was a dedicated teacher her entire life, and it spanned generations.
And you missed her.
She would come twice a week after school and give me my assignments, and that's when I would take my test. Of course, living right across the street from the school, it was easy for her to stop on her way home, pick up the assignments I had finished, and give me my new ones.
Did your mother help you then? But she was a certified teacher that would come in.
Yes, she was a certified teacher then that allowed me to pass on with my class.
When Jessie Frieden was having her problem, Cornell was help, but
Okay.
a certified teacher would stop
Mm-hmm.
and help give the assignments. pick
It
them
was
up.
kind of interesting. Your report cards had your attendance, days absent and days present. And Miss Vasby had figured out that the days that I spent in the hospital that year were the days she put me down as absent. The rest of them, she counted me present.
Lois, you had a country school teacher, a man teacher, that first year you went to country school. Where was he from? And where did he live?
Was Daryl Coppernall. He lived in Wadena and was, I believe, the UB minister down there. And I was thinking that was he originally from Wisconsin?
I don't know.
For some reason that sticks in my mind. And why I don't know, but he wasn't real popular. I don't just, what the problem, well, with kids, or I think the parents, either one. But one other thing that I do remember about country school is just a half mile straight across the hollow here to where the school was. And I was scared of the neighbor's cattle, and so I guess sometimes some of the older brothers, David or Paul, would walk me to the line fence and then to our line fence, so then I would walk home from there, which was halfway. But then some of the other times I would walk the road, well, and I would walk with, because we had half-day school, and get out at noon, and I would walk around the road then with Anita Denler, and then that would make it about, I think, 1.25 miles rather than just a half mile. But and I don't know why I was scared of the neighbor's cattle, but I always was. I never remember Dad taking us to school. I suppose maybe he might have in bad weather, but I don't remember that.
Do you remember tell us about Elgin, anything you remember that has changed? Did you ever go very often?
Well, when I was a kid, and I don't know just how long it lasted, Saturday was the day that we went to town. Either went to town at night in the warmer weather and town on Saturday afternoon in cold weather. Yeah, I guess when I can first remember, there was probably a business in every building, and I guess there were 4 grocery stores that in my time. I guess the population hasn't changed much, but a lot of businesses have come and gone, or have plain gone in my time.
But have you seen a lot of expansion in the co-op?
That is one thing that has expanded a lot over the years. In fact, I was in late 50s, I guess it was, when I can remember when the co-op burned. It was when it was right back by where the fire station is in Elgin now. I believe we were out sliding that night, and we brothers, and we could see a glow, red glow, but we didn't know what it was, but we found out later that it was the co-op that had burned.
Cheryl, you tell us something about Elgin that as today, that it has, that didn't used to have.
Well, some of the businesses have changed, and there are a lot of improvements, and of course it's sad that some of the businesses aren't there anymore. Of course, we have the new W.F. Kohler Memorial Library, or the W.F. Kohler Memorial Building that houses the library, and I had the privilege of working with Walt for a good number of years, so I think that's pretty nice. Walt was quite a gentleman.
Wasn't it said that his office was where the first library in town was?
Yes, and I did not know that until they started building the new library.
Well, that's really interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then they have housing units.
Yes, the Elgin Homes Incorporated is downtown, and then the Homestead Park apartment buildings are in Upper Town. Those are new. The laundromat, of course, has taken the place where the furniture store was, and that is a very nice facility for the community.
Louis, have you been following the maze?
Oh, I've heard about it, and I guess I saw it staked out down there, but I haven't been back since. After, I guess it may have been planted when I'd seen it, but I haven't seen it since.
They have a skeleton for the reviewing stand in there now, so I guess it's coming. Have you been noticing what should be the new housing development?
That's, well, I guess of course I knew it as Cappers. That's back when I could first remember, and I guess probably up till later 60s. That was Cappers' egg laying facilities there. And I was near, I wasn't familiar with their operation, but I knew that's what it was.
And then it became Howard's, didn't it?
Yeah, there were he had farrowing facilities there for several years, but then it had been, the buildings themselves had been empty for quite a number of years.
It'd be interesting to watch some of these new developments develop. There is a trailer going in, a mobile home going in there in that area they've set aside too. Do you have any people that you can say influenced your life?
Well, of course, my parents, and I guess I've probably, although I don't remember probably a lot of the things that I heard and maybe should have remembered, but there's quite a number of men in the community. My father's, well, a little older than my dad or whatever, that I guess growing up I was more comfortable or whatever visiting with older people, and I enjoyed them a lot. I know I was amazed at several different ones that seemed so good on remembering the dates on the dates as far months and years and stuff that certain events had happened. And I guess I consider myself a good friend of Otis Roethlisberger down here that's been gone, 12, 13 years now. He was a bachelor that was interested in, well, his life was shorthorn cattle and sheep, and he did a lot of traveling throughout the country and stuff. And I enjoyed visiting a lot with him.
I think everyone enjoyed Otis. how about you? You mentioned a teacher you wished you'd gone to, but she helped you.
Mm-hmm. She was my senior high Sunday school teacher. I did have her there. I would say that maybe Walt Kohler had quite an influence on me. I used to go into his office a lot on my noon hours after I would finish my dinner, and he'd sit and reminisce about the Depression. He liked to talk a lot about that because that was a difficult time to be in the bank, I'm sure. And he would try to relate stories to me as to how it was. And of course, I started before we were computerized, and when we went to the computers, I remember he came out one time and wanted me to look up something, and he'd always point to that machine, look up and give me those figures, and so I would do it, and he'd write them down, and he tripped off into his office, and about an hour later he came back and he says, "By gosh, that answer is right." He had gone in and worked it out by hand. And another thing that's kind of interesting is that I'm beginning to think a little more like him all the time. As we get older, we trust these new machines a little less maybe than the younger ones do.
Well, at least he had to gain a respect for the computer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So.
He did have quite a memory. I remember him telling when he was a Boy Scout, they walked, you know what Falling Springs is? Out by Auburn.
Okay.
They walked all the way out there for their camping trip.
Oh, really?
That'd be quite a walk. Have any special memories of events? How about your FFA, 4-H, fairs?
Well, if you wanted to sentence me to cruel and unusual punishment, you'd send me to a fair for a week. I'm not a real strong fair goer. I guess we had took some 4-H projects up there for 6-8 years, I guess. But I really am not that fond of fairs.
Did you enjoy, when you were in high school, you were involved in FHA, right?
Right.
4-H.
Right.
And that probably led to showing things at the fair.
Yes.
Were you in 4-H at the?
No, when we were growing up, 4-H, I think, was pretty much just for the country kids, as we said. We were town kids, they were country kids.
Tom?
Refrigerators.
Refrigerator, okay. Hobbies, Cheryl. What is your hobby? Tell me about your spinning.
I did come into possession of a family heirloom. It had been my great-grandmother's spinning wheel, and I didn't know anything about it. And then a gal, Nuna Cass, moved to Claremont, who gave spinning lessons one time, and I thought I better see if I could make that old wheel work. And so I took lessons, and it has been an interesting hobby. It's not one that I've pursued with a great abundance because I don't have the time, but it's relaxing, and I'm really glad I learned how. Found out that the old spinning wheel will spin. Of course, then I had to buy a new one because I wanted to be able to spin a bigger variety of things, and my mother told me it would be the biggest, most expensive pair of mittens I ever made, and I haven't made the mittens yet.
Where did you get your wool?
I have bought some, but the most fun is just Irene Hofer lives at the edge of Claremont, and she keeps about 3 sheep as pets. And when she's shearing sheep every so often, every few years, I will go over and just pick up the fleece as they're shearing it off the sheep and put it in a gunny sack and bring it home. You have to sort it out, and some of the stuff that's really dirty you don't bother to clean up, and you pick out some of the better areas. You don't use the back of the fleece because that's gotten all the sun and the wind and the rain, and it isn't as high a quality as the wool in the other areas of the body. But you get enough and then you wash it and clean it and card it and spin it.
Well, it looks like fun, but I'm not going to try it. What about your hobbies? You fish? No?
Well, I do a little fishing. I guess I enjoy the outdoors, whether it's just walking. I do some hunting. I've got a couple ponds. I guess probably my most enjoyable thing is working in the timber. I probably I'm not there as much as I'd like to be, and maybe I'm there more than I should be. Maybe I should be doing some other things, but that is one of my more enjoyable pastimes.
How many new trays did you put out? Do you have growing around your new pond?
Well, in the fall of '96, I built a pond 1.5 miles north of Wadena, and then that fall I planted walnuts, the nuts themselves, and then in the next spring, in the spring of '97, I went in and put or had seedlings planted between the rows of nuts that I've planted, and so there's about 8 acres down there that I have done that way.
Are they coming well? Walnuts?
This is the second growing season for them now, and they really look quite good. There'll be plenty of trees there.
Is it all walnuts or?
Walnuts, and then I put in red oak and ash seedlings, and so there'll be some natural regeneration. Either squirrels or whatever will bring some nuts in or whatever in, or seeds will blow in. But those are the basic 3 varieties that'll be there.
You have the pond stocked?
Yes, it's a little over 6 acres, and one of the things that I was interested in, or was hoping for, was to get some waterfowl on it, because I wasn't familiar with them at all. And so far this year we've had some goslings hatch out down there, and wood ducks, and there should be some mallards hatching out if they haven't already. The original pond was built in '79, and this is about 3/4 of a mile farther north from the big pond, and I also built a log cabin there that same fall.
That's an enjoyable spot.
Yes, it is. I enjoy it a lot.
You farm.
Right.
What are some of the methods that you use?
Well, I dairy and feed some cattle. I guess we raise corn, hay, and some small grains. One of the things that I'm quite proud of is that in the late '30s, Dad and his brother John did the first contouring in Marion Township, and of course we've continued that ever since. I don't know how to farm any different than that, and of course the last number of years why we've went to minimum till, a little bit of no-till, but I guess I'm very conscious of conservation.
I'm looking at these plaques behind you. What does that one that says Grandma Cow mean?
That's a cow that in her lifetime had produced over 200,000 pounds of milk. That's not real common. Takes a pretty good old cow to make that much milk.
She's still milking?
No, well, she wound up with, I think, 225,000 or something like that. She's gone now. I had another one make it this spring, but she's gone already too. But so those are the only two I've ever had, and that's a little special when you get one that'll last that long.
Sounds like it. Speaking of milking, what would you do without REC?
Well, I wouldn't be milking. Of course, we've had REC all my life, and I think they got it in the late 30s, early 40s. When Dad was at home, they had what do you call a light plant. It was a generator, and I believe that was 32 volt. And I don't just for sure how many years they had that, but they had it for a number of years before they got REC. And there were a few wind generators around that then they would store that in batteries and then have lights or whatever off the batteries. But they had a electric generator or a gas generator, gas powered generator.
Be hard to build without what we have now.
My mother, they lived on the road between Volga and Wadena, and so that was interstate. And I asked Dad just recently when they got electricity. He said, well, they didn't get it until after the war, the second war. And he didn't know why, but REC was available before they hooked onto interstate.
What other stories do you have you could tell us? I asked you one time, I think, about flags that down there in where are they? Flying on those twin rocks.
Oh.
That's quite a sight.
Margaret's referring to I guess you'd call it a memorial to Charles Erickson at Farmersburg. And it happens that Charles worked for my parents before and after he was in the went to service in the Second War. But anyway, he died in about 95, and his brothers put a couple flags up on what they call the Chimney Rocks, I believe it is. And it's actually on their home farm. This is between, well, what they call the Bull Thistle Corner in Farmersburg. But anyway, that's the story behind that. And
do you have any more stories that I know you have, that you could tell us?
oh, let's see. I guess one of the things stories that I am familiar with, or a little familiar with, down near where Harry Biedekofer lives now, there's a couple rocks that are a few feet apart, and when some Lindebauers first came to this country, maybe in the mid 1850s, 1800s, or somewhere in there, this family spent the first winter, they covered those rocks over and spent the first winter living there. And I guess now we can't really quite imagine anyone doing that, how you could survive doing that, but they did it.
How many were there?
I don't know. But there was a small baby there. I don't know she's born during the winter, before, or whatever, but there was a baby that was in that family too that lived there.
It's hard to believe that, isn't it? Tom, you want to tag something else? You have any more stories you can tell us? Huh? You want to take it in and, I wanted to get the Swiss bell, if you could tell us something about that. Huh?
This is, whoops. This is a Swiss cowbell that came from my dad's uncles, the Christen brothers. It had always hung out on the gate arch at the edge of the yard, and so happens that I was able to get it, and that's, I guess, one of the things that is a piece of history for our family. And we think that it that they brought it with them. There used to be a set. There was more than this to a set, but this is the only one that is left. This isn't the original strap, but the buckle is the original buckle, and that's a hand forged buckle. And and we had it cleaned up over at Sumner, and so now it's been inside the last number of years here. But I can always remember it hanging over their gate at the brothers.
Pretty good color, carry that old lady, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Are there any readings on it in Swiss?
No, there's. I don't believe there is. There's. No.
I guess every picture means something to them. Beautiful thing.
Back to kids or whatever. Well, this had been before I was in junior high. We went a half-mile north here across the road with the Sanders kids, and that was our first, or I should say my first cabin building experience. They had willow trees out there in the hollow, and we cut those and made three buildings there. We didn't, we called them cabins, but they were more like corn cribs, I guess. They weren't notched in or anything. One just laid on top of the other, and we had a hand drill that we drilled holes down in and pegged the corners together. And I guess that's one regret that I have, is that nobody ever took any pictures of those, as we were like 12, 13 years old or something like that, and we thought that's pretty big stuff, and we were building those, and I don't know if they were maybe 8 foot square or something like that. I just don't remember. But we had one of them up. We got a second story on it. I don't know just how high that would have been, or we got a little bit on the second story built anyway. I don't think they ever had any roof or anything on them, but we were building cabins back then.
Were they together? Knew one another?
Yeah, and I don't know if we ever got much done on the second one or not, but we had it started anyway.
I think there's one started back in our timber one time too.
Yeah, about 2 logs, I think it was.
I suppose they were going to build a whole village, Cheryl.
I wish they would have taken a picture.
Yeah.
Well, if you run your course, I can shut her off for
Yeah.
a moment. I would like to.
Before you came to town.
Mid of the morning.
Now we gotta hold this.
What are you after?
I'm just taking the picture of those things on the wall. And if I, might as well take your kitchen here.
Oh, Tom, please,
I
no,
like it too.
Alright.
no. I didn't even get the dishes done.
Good.
Just quit,
Now
I'm
we
afraid
got
you're
it.
gonna fall over one of those cords,
And
Tom.
then here's your file cabinet, here,
We just-
where's the dog?
Here's the dog.
Sadie, say something. Oh, yeah.
Can you
There
sit
you
for
go.
him? Huh? Can you
Sit
sit,
up.
Sadie?
Can you
Come
sit
on.
up?
Can you sit? Come on.
There you
Oh, yeah, come on, that's a good
There we
one.
go.